Hello, welcome to another watercolor tutorial for beginners. In today's lesson we're going to be painting a still life of cherry tomatoes. So this is going to give you a great opportunity for learning how to use masking techniques, today using masking tape instead of our usual masking fluid, and how to really develop great sense of contrast and depth in your paintings. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be painting some cherry tomatoes in a basket with a very dark background. And so it's really important that your first step after drawing these tomatoes in the basket in these leaf shapes is to mask everything completely so that you can have a nice clean pass in that background that is very dark. So what I've done today is used masking tape, layer it over the top of the drawing, and then carefully cut it away with a razor blade like this. Just a straight razor. The only thing you need to be careful of is that you only cut through the tape and not press hard enough to cut the paper itself. With these small stems that it's too difficult to cut around, I used masking fluid with a small nozzle and got those edges secure. Then for the very tiny lines like the hairs of the tomato stems, I'll be putting those in at the end with Pro White. So once everything is dry and masked and protected, get a nice large flat brush and mix up this dark color. And once I have some Payne's Gray on the brush, I'm going to start in the background and layer it down on dry paper so that my darks will stay as dark as possible. Then into that, I'm also going to add some different shades of blue and let those all mix on the page. I'm making sure that I get all the way up to the edges of my tape. You want nice heavy color that won't get too light as it dries. Then one of the things that makes this painting really interesting is that there's a severe contrast between the darks up here and then it gets a lot lighter down here. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. I'm going to get a much lighter cerulean blue on my brush and mix it with what I already have so that there's a transition. And so I'm going to be painting these shapes of shadows around the fruits and the basket and the leaves, but I'm also avoiding the shapes where there's highlight. So I'm looking at the shapes of the shadows as they fall here. And then I can give a light spray with my water bottle to get just an idea of some texture on the table itself, but I don't want to get too fussy with that. Remember, it's always the best if you can let multiple colors mix on the page. Try to let the watercolor do some of the work itself. So for instance, if I want to develop some texture, I might want to do that with the spray bottle or by just using a fairly dry brush. And then I'm also going to use some different colors, maybe some purples in here. Let those mix with the shadows, spice it up a little bit, make it look a little bit more interesting. I want some darks in the corners. Same thing in this corner. And then I'm going to let this dry completely. Okay, this is dry, but I feel like it's gotten too light. So I'm going to go ahead and add a second pass of just more intense Payne's Gray. So just the pure Payne's Gray, nice and dark. And I'm adding it to the top here. Now that second pass is dry, so I'm going to go ahead and lift up the tape and the masking fluid and we'll see what it looks like underneath. Just take your time. But then I'm going to look at my reference and find those spots of extreme brights right around the edges, anything that might be difficult to keep bright. I'm going to use my small pot of masking fluid and a little brush so that I have a lot of control, and then just take my time and paint on the highlights, especially those highlights that are very bright with clean edges. So let me do this off camera and then I'll come back with the masked highlights in place and we'll be ready to start painting the tomatoes. Okay, so we've remasked the highlights on the fruit. Now we need to push forward to painting the fruit and the basket. Now remember in watercolor painting that you always want to paint back to front.